Guys, welcome back to part 5 of Septemics. We're joined with Jim Marshall. Jim's going to discuss the levels and part 5 of all the levels and scales of Septemics. You want to introduce yourself real quick, Jim, before we get started again?
Yes. For those of you who don't know who I am the discoverer of hitherto unknown natural phenomena, which greatly aid in the understanding of people, from which I created a revolutionary practical philosophic system called Septemics and published it in the book, Septemics, Hierarchies of Human Phenomena. Today, we're going to discuss some of the content of that book. Okay, so this is the scale of communication. Now, I have to tell you, this one scale, if you study it and learn it and master it, will be the best thing that ever happened to you in your life, even if you're a lottery winner. Because communication is how we make contact with other persons. You can't really get anything done by yourself. Even if you are a gardener who has his own practice, he still has to deal with his customers. He still has to deal with the people who sell him his tools and seeds and things like that. So everybody has to deal with people. Now, of course, everybody is born into some kind of a family, even if it's a small family, and that is usually problematic. So communication is really the most important thing to a human being. If you're not starving to death, if you're not bleeding to death, if you're not dying of thirst, if you're not in a hospital because you have a terminal illness, communication is the most important thing. It's how you get a job. It's how you increase your income. It's how you attract members of the opposite sex. It's how you learn things from others. So this tells you with specificity how to communicate. Now, this is a linear scale, meaning it just goes from 1 through 7. There's no apparent overlap between 1 and 7 as there is in a spiral scale. This is a quantum scale, meaning there's no intervening point between these levels. You're either at level 1 or you're at level 2 or level 3. There's nothing in between. It's a specific scale, meaning you can communicate differently with different people and in different contexts. So your professional communication might be adequate, but perhaps your social communication is not. So this has no meaning in a general sense. It has to have a context to make sense. Now, this is a group scale. So you're necessarily, by definition, involved in some kind of a group, or there wouldn't be communication. Oddly enough, a human being himself is a kind of a group, because you have the being, the mind, and the body. Those are 3 different things. And you as a being have to be able to communicate to your mind and to your body. And as you get better at that, you will be able to deal with those phenomena better. So this is inescapable. I can honestly say I'm meeting new people every day. I'm talking to new people every day. I'm in touch with people all over the world. I've done almost 200 interviews, and I've been a public figure almost my entire life. And I can honestly say fewer than 1% of the people I have contacted have what I would call good communication skills. And in light of the fact that it impacts everything you do, it is a tremendous deficit. Now notice, under the word direction, it says plus, minus, plus, minus, plus, minus. Those of you who are familiar with Septemics will know that that means outflow, inflow, outflow, inflow, outflow, inflow. So I should say 4 out of the 7 are outflows and 3 of the 7 are inflows. So the way communication proceeds is first you outflow, then you inflow, then you outflow, then you inflow, then you outflow, then you inflow, then you outflow, and that cycle is complete. Now, most people don't know that. That is absolutely vital, because if you are inflowing while another person is inflowing, that is a very bad sign. Have you ever been in a situation where you have 2 people sitting there together and neither of them is saying anything? That's very awkward. Also, you don't want to speak while someone else is speaking. Then you're both outflowing at the same time. Now, it's not to simply manage the inflow and the outflow. You have to know what level of the scale to be on. Now, this tells you the way communication proceeds. Okay? So you start by being present. Now, you might say, well, of course you're present. Well, have you ever been around someone who's out to lunch, so to speak? There are people whose bodies are in the room, but they are not. Many of these people are in insane asylums. Or if you have somebody who's extremely upset, right? Or in shock, his body is there, but he's not. You know, sometimes a person will have some terrible tragedy and the firemen or the policemen show up and they try to talk to the person. The person can't talk. He's in shock. Okay, so he's physically present, but spiritually, he's absent. He's not being there. Okay, so the first thing you have to do is be there. So, for example, let's say you are confronted with somebody who has tremendous power or influence, or who you idolize. Like, for example, the Queen of England, or the King of England, or the President of the United States. There are many people who would be flustered by that, meaning they can't be present. It's too much for them. This is something that you would see, for example, with the Beatles. I actually attended a live Beatles concert. And most of the girls, and of course the crowd was mostly girls, I was there because I was a musician already. They were there because they idolized the Beatles. They were not present. You could not talk to these people. They were essentially temporarily insane. Okay? And if you watch video of the Beatles, if you haven't been to one of their shows, you'll see what I mean. Those screaming girls are not present. Their bodies are present, but they are out to lunch, as they say. Once you are there, then you have the opportunity to go to level 2 and observe. Observation is an inflow. Now, let me go back to present. You might say, well, how is being there an outflow? It's an outflow because you're saying, I'm here, I'm present. You see? And if you are unable to outflow, you are unable to be present, and that is why people get flustered. So I've met many famous, powerful people. Didn't bother me at all. I just knew how to be present, and I was present. I did not go like Jackie Gleason does, hama, 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 in The Honeymooners. Okay? So you just have to know how to be present. Then, once you are present, you have that outflow going. See, the person sees you're present, they get the outflow. Now it's your turn to inflow by observation. Observation is the same thing as inspection. It's an inflow. You inspect the person, you collect data, and you see, is this person smiling? Is this person friendly? Is this person making eye contact? Is this person looking healthy? Like if you look at a person and he looks like he's ready to collapse, that tells you something.
Mm.
Okay, so the next thing you have, now notice, no talking has gone on yet. Okay, you're at level 2, no talking. So the second thing you have to do is inspect to know what you're dealing with. People make catastrophic mistakes by skipping this. You know, there's such a thing as knowing when to ask the question,
Mhm.
knowing when to broach the subject. So you might need to have a difficult conversation with somebody, and you inspect the person and you say, this person is not ready for this conversation. I'll try it another time, right? That's just from observation.
Mhm.
Very important.
Mm.
Then the next thing after that is poise. Poise means composure. Now, poise is an outflow. If you ever watch beauty contests,
Mhm.
poise is one of the big things. That's what they look for. It's not enough to just have a nice figure. You have to have poise. You have to have composure. Okay? You carry yourself in a way, which is another way of saying you're being present, you're observing, and you're poised. Because you see, if you're not present and you're not observing, you can't be poised. Once you are poised only after you have inspected and are present. So a person who's not being there, like a catatonic schizophrenic, he has no composure. He's not even being there. He can't be at level 3 because he's not even at level 1.
Mm.
So a person who's present, if he doesn't inspect anything, he doesn't display any poise. How can you have poise if you haven't inspected? You have to see what's going on around you. So let's say you go over to your friend's house, right? And you're asking him to loan you $10. So you walk in and you see that his wife is passed out on the floor. Okay, you're observing. So that's not a good time to ask him for $10.
Mm.
You maintain your composure. You say to your friend, what's happening here? See, that's a poised way of dealing with it. Okay. Or if something bad happens around you, you don't go all to pieces. You know, there's this cliche about a woman sees a mouse and screams and jumps on a chair. You've probably seen that. So that's a person losing composure. So it's really important in dealing with anyone or any creature to have composure. So I've been in all kinds of situations that people would be terrified by, and I didn't lose my composure because I know about this and I've developed it.
Mm.
And that diffuses the situation.
Mm.
So when a person sees that you have poise, it has an effect on him. He sees that you're not a pushover, that you can maintain your composure. The next thing you have to do, see, no speaking has happened yet. The next thing you do is encourage. Now, encouragement means inviting. You have to invite the person to speak to you, to be your friend, to be your associate, to tell you something, to divulge something to you, right? These are all things that happen by encouragement. Now, encouragement is an inflow. You're saying, tell me, how can I help you? Right? Like you go into a store. This isn't true anymore because America has deteriorated, but it used to be you go into a store, a person would come up to you and say, how may I help you?
Mhm.
See, that's encouragement.
Mm.
That person is encouraging you to be a customer. You say, well, I'm looking for a brown suit, all right, with a 40 chest. Very good. See, because that person encouraged you, you expressed to him, which is the next thing now. Most people skip this level. They don't realize it. So you can encourage somebody by smiling. You can encourage somebody by waving to them. You can encourage somebody by saying something like, uh-huh, uh-huh, I see, tell me. So a person runs up to you and says, 6 guys are chasing me. You say, tell me about that. See, you encourage the guy. You see?
Mm-hmm.
So when you encourage somebody, they want to communicate to you because you have invited it. That is a good thing.
Mm.
So the police show up at your door and you say, "How may I help you, officer?" See? And that is a good beginning. And then you see what he has to say. You see?
Mm.
Then we come down to 5, which is expression. Now, this is where dopey people begin communication. They just blurt it out. They don't do 1, 2, 3, or 4. Okay? So if you read the chapter, you'll see I give several scenarios in which I explain good communication as opposed to bad communication and show you how to use this.
Mm.
So, expression, you finally say something to the person, whatever it is, which means you're conveying information to them. That is obviously an outflow. You're outflowing whatever it is you're expressing.
Mm.
But before you do that, you better do 1, 2, 3, and 4, or the expression is not going to be welcome.
Mm. I see it. I can see it.
Yeah. So let me give you an example. So once I was at a party and I saw this beautiful girl. I couldn't really talk to her right then, so I got hold of her phone number, and I called her up the next day and I said, "Remember me? I was so and so." "Oh yeah." Obviously, I did this while I was present, observed employees, and then I said, "I think you're incredibly beautiful. How about going out with me?" So you see, I encouraged her right away.
Mm-hmm.
That's an encouragement.
How'd that work out for you?
And so then she said yes. See? So you have to, now there's nothing about any of this that's insincere. This is intensely sincere. Some people, when I try to train them in this, think it has something to do with acting. This had nothing to do with acting. It's being yourself. Being yourself when you're present, being yourself when you observe, being yourself when you show poise, being yourself when you encourage the person, and being yourself when you express something.
Right.
Okay? Now, after you express, the next thing that happens is express is response. Right? There's going to be a response, some kind of a response. Now, response is handling it because you have to handle the response. So that's an inflow. Our response is not an outflow, it's an inflow. Even if you are saying something, you are handling the person. So a person comes up to you and says, "I feel like I'm going to pass out." And you say to him something like, "What's going on?" So you're handling it. Or, "Would you like to sit down?" You see, it's an appropriate response. You're handling the person. Now, if a person makes a comment that is of no particular consequence, the handling for that could be trivial. But if a person tells you something significant, like your wife tells you, "I want a divorce," that requires a response. You better handle that very well. And you handle it by inflow. What's the problem? Have I offended you? What's bothering you? You see, that's handling it. So that's how you respond. So what, in any context, let's say one of your employees comes up to you with the job, right? And he has some big concern. The guy says, "I'm really worried because the guy next to me seems to be doing drugs on the job." See, you have to say, "Tell me about that." You're handling it. You see?
Mm-hmm.
And very few people know how to do that.
Just the response of handling.
Yeah, how to respond to a situation. Let's say a guy is angry at you. If you handle it the wrong way, you might get into a fist fight.
Right.
So first of all, if you're doing 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5, before, you're already diffusing the situation.
Mm.
So then you have to handle it. guy comes up to you yelling and screaming, rah, rah, rah. You say, well, I'm really sorry that we didn't meet your expectations. Can you tell me exactly what the problem is? You see, you're handling the guy.
Right.
Now,
Right.
dopey people will fight back at this. Someone comes up to me and says, you're an idiot. I'm not going to say drop dead, which that's not handling it. I would say, well, why would you say that? What exactly are you talking about? You see, I'm handling the guy. So that's really important. That's how you stay out of trouble.
Mm.
And then the next step, the last step, is termination. How do you terminate a communication? By acknowledging the person. You say, thank you. Very good.
Mm.
So that's an outflow. When you terminate it, it's an outflow. You're outflowing to the person, I got it. And if you do it properly, 99% of the time, the person will stop talking right then, right on the spot.
Mm. Mm.
So that is a full cycle of communication. When you have this going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, you have a good relationship.
Mm.
Now I'll tell you another secret about this. The better your communication skills are, the further down the scale you have to go. And I'll tell you what I mean. When Elvis walked out on stage, the crowd erupted. He hasn't done anything. He hasn't sung a song yet. He hasn't even said hello. He was just being there. But his presence was so great. That's all they needed. You see, they loved him. So it was magic. So the further you have to go down in this, the more problematic it is. Now, the ultimate termination is like, don't ever talk to me again. I don't want to hear from you again. And you hang up the phone. That's termination. I had a girlfriend once who pursued me to other states. I couldn't get rid of her. I finally wrote her a nasty letter and said, I don't want to hear from you. Don't talk to me. You are persona non grata. Go away. Okay? And it still did not get rid of her completely, but it made a big difference. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you have to do that.
Mm-hmm. Now, would you classify that as putting it in the category of not good communication, or you've communicated enough to where you had to be like that?
Well, there had been plenty of communication, and I wanted to terminate the communication with this person. I didn't want to hear from this person. And I had good reason, believe me, not to want to hear from this person. Compelling reasons. So you terminate it. And that's the end of the communication.
Okay. Now, what do you mean when you say the majority of people, like 99% of people you come across, they have bad communication right away?
Yeah. Yes, they do.
Can you give like a couple examples of that real quick?
Well, I have a friend of mine who's a lovely person. Okay. So one day I said something to her that was kind of at the end of a conversation, and she just walked away.
Oh.
Now, I kind of expected her to smile and say, right. But she didn't. So I guess she was in a bad mood. So, it wasn't enough to make me not like the person, but it wasn't the right way to handle it.
Gotcha.
She should have just acknowledged it and then walked away. I'll give you another example. There's a person that I see regularly who has remarkably good communication skills. And this person stands out like a neon sign that's 10 foot high. Because her communication skills are so much better than the average person. You know, it's like bumping into Aaron Judge. He's this 280-pound giant, you know?
Mhm.
It's like, whoa, this is not a regular person, you know?
Mm.
So that's like a person who, she probably could learn some things from me about communication, but her communication skills are probably the best of anybody I know right now. And this is not even really a friend, it's more like an acquaintance. So if your relationship is dealing in the mostly in the bottom of the scale, it's a very bad problem. You are in a lot of trouble. You know,
Mm.
like you have a teenager and you have to keep handling him and handling him and handling him. That relationship is in big trouble. Okay? Your
Right.
communication with that person was broken a long time ago.
Right.
So if when you have a really good communication, you know, like if I see my sisters, we hug.
Mhm.
See, right away. It's like 1, 2, and 3 are there, just like that.
Mm.
And it's instant encouragement. So, you know, there's not, we don't have to say too many things. You know how when you know somebody really well, you don't really have to say too much. You
Yes.
start to say it and they go, yeah, I got it, I got it. See, because your communication with that person is so good, you don't have to say a whole sentence. You can just nod or smile and they get it.
Yes.
So that's a sign of a good relationship, you see. You
Mhm.
don't have to say a lot. You know
Mhm.
how if you just spend time with someone you love, what they call quality time, that's being at the top of this scale.
Mm.
You know, like when my son was a kid, I spent a lot of time with him. Nothing in particular. Sometimes we went places, sometimes we did trivial little things. Didn't matter. I was
Mm.
being there, he was being there, and it was good.
Mhm.
See, I was paying attention to him, which is level 2. And he was paying attention to me. And I was keeping my poise all the time. So if he did something, you know, little kids do dopey things, I didn't make a thing about it. I just kept my composure, you know?
Mm.
So that was good. So now he's an adult and we still have a good relationship.
Now, would you
Because I
say
spent, go ahead.
kids that are raised in that kind of environment that don't have the good communication, they learn exactly that, not to have good communication with others?
Exactly. 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 It's a
Mm.
bad habit.
Mm.
They get into a bad habit. You know, I was raised kind of the old fashioned way. And a big thing, the way I was raised was to be respectful. Respect your elders, respect your teachers, respect the reverend, whatever, you know, be respectful.
Mhm.
And so that is a very powerful thing. It's not that you're allowing people to, you're making yourself inferior to people. It's that you're doing 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Mm. Mm. Yes. I can see that definitely,
Yeah,
especially people who, who want like who keep saying they want more respect, they want more respect. So you can see this where you have to be that. You have to give respect. If you're not a respectful person to begin
right,
with, you're not going to get
right.
respect.
I have bumped into people, complete strangers, you know, and they'll say to me something like, "Oh, you're a very respectful person," and because it comes over, and the reason they get that is because I'm doing 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Without even having to think about it most of
Yes,
the times.
without having to think about it. Yes, it's I've done it enough that it's, you know, it's like any other skill, it becomes ingrained in you after a while.
Hmm.
So people, you know, the way they perceive it is that I'm respectful, and I am, but this is how to do it.
Mm. Makes total sense.
Yeah. So this chapter is really important. I give drills corresponding to each of these 7 levels, where I teach you, here's an exercise teaching you how to be present. Here's an exercise teaching you how to be observant, and so forth, for each of the 7 levels. So I'm actually telling you how to develop these skills.
Mm.
So it's very useful. It's very useful because this will impact everything you do. Even staying by yourself, it will impact. So, for example, let's say I see something on the internet that's offensive to me.
Mm.
So my response is, I'm going to maintain my poise. I'm not going to let this stupidity sully my person. See, I'm by myself. Still, I'm going to maintain my poise. So this is something people can see. You know, there are people who have these skills, and if you just watch them, you'll see these 7 things going on with them.
Mm.
And you know, people who are downscale people, criminals, subversives, terrorists, people like that, they don't have these skills. Definitely not. Or they wouldn't be what they are.
Makes total sense.
Yeah. So, you know, like if you go on a job interview and you have excellent communication skills, they're probably going to hire you. I mean, you're not going there because you don't think you're qualified for the job. You know, it's something you think you can do. And if you just communicate properly, they'll hire you. And then you just keep doing that and they will want to keep you around.
Mm. Yeah.
Because everything is communication.
Mm.
You communicate with your coworkers, you communicate with the public, you communicate with the boss. Okay. And if you handle them, they'll want you around.
Mm. Yes.
So people who violate these skills are people you don't want around. I mean, we've known people like that. We've all known people like that.
Yeah.
So, like, if you have some bully in the neighborhood, right? He's not encouraging you. He's probably not even observing you. Because if he were observing you, he'd say, well, he's a regular guy. Why should I bother him? See, if he were present, he probably wouldn't even be a bully.
This is true.
So
True.
I urge you, get the book, study the chapter, do the skills, develop these 7 skills, because relationships live and die by this scale.
Mm. Yes. Yes, it's very like right out, open. If like, why don't you want to deal with somebody, or why don't you hang around with somebody anymore? Well, easily come back. I can't ever talk to the person. It's very simple. I don't like communicating with that person.
Right. Any questions?
Nope. I think
It's
you
worth
covered it.
mentioning here that the
Mhm.
axis, which is on the right, go back.
Oh,
The axis, communication, go back to communication. Right. Okay, good. So I think I covered all this. Okay, next. Okay, the scale of allegiance. Now, this is, again, extremely important. Anytime a relationship deteriorates, it's because allegiance deteriorates, even with animals. If you show allegiance to your dog, he will love you. You don't even have to be smart enough to be a human being for this to work. Now, This is a spiral scale, which means there is an apparent congruence between levels 1 and 7.
Mm.
Level 1 is no allegiance, and level 7 is no allegiance. But at level 1, it's no need for an allegiance. And at level 7, it's no possible allegiance. These are very different things. So here is a person who's oblivious, which is level 7. If a person is oblivious, how can he have an allegiance? He's oblivious. You know, this is a guy who doesn't even notice you come in the room, doesn't even want to acknowledge your existence, or is unconscious or something like that. So that's dramatically different from somebody who's level 1, which is no need for allegiance because he's extroverted. Now, let me tell you what that means. When you are extroverted, it means that your attention is out on the environment around you. You're looking at people, you're looking at situations. Like if you're driving a car, you want to be extroverted. You don't want to be thinking about, introverted, gee, I wonder if my girlfriend still loves me. No, you want your attention extroverted, okay? And I can tell you that I have evaded automobile accidents from stupid drivers many times because I was extroverted.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw what they were doing and I was able to avoid it.
Mm.
So that's how you tell 1 from 7. But it's possible, if you're not too observant, to make the mistake of saying, like if you have a guy who has no need for an allegiance, you might say, well, he's oblivious. It might not be true at all. He might just be completely extroverted. Now, this is a quantum scale, meaning there's no intervening level. You're either at 1 or you're at 2, or you're at 3. There's nothing in between.
Mm-hmm.
And that is necessarily true because there is a reversal of polarity, which is listed under direction. When you're at 1, you're inflowing. When you're 2, you're outflowing. That's a reversal of polarity. Or you might say it's 180 degrees out of phase. So when you have a reversal of polarity like that, it's necessarily a quantum because there's no intervening level, really. Mm-hmm. So then this is a specific scale. So it has no general meaning. It only has a meaning in a context. What is your allegiance toward your family? What is your allegiance toward your church? What is your allegiance toward your country? And so forth. Now, notice it says aligns with the scale of identity. We covered the scale of identity. The scale of identity is an individual scale. The scale of allegiance is a group scale. And if you study these two scales, you will see that the scale of allegiance is the group manifestation of the scale of identity. And the scale of identity is the individual manifestation of the scale of allegiance. Mm-hmm. So these two correspond exactly. Now, what determines allegiance? This is a secret most people don't know. Perception is what determines allegiance. The more perceptive you are, the more allegiance you have. So basically what this means is, if a person is not paying attention, how can he have an allegiance to you? He's not even paying attention. So at the bottom of the scale, you have no perception. At the top of the scale, you have maximal perception. So a person who's oblivious has no perception. That is what oblivion means, okay? And a person who's extroverted has maximal perception. That is what extroversion means. It means literally turned outward. So you have maximal perception. And the levels in between, you have, as you go descend the scale, you have deteriorating perception. So relationships begin at 1, where you have no need for allegiance. So, right, you go to, let's say, the bowling alley, and there's some person there you've never met before, you don't know the person's name, you don't know anything, right? He's just a guy. So as you're bowling, you start to talk, and you start to develop a relationship.
Mhm.
See? And by the time you're done, you say, hey, why don't we go for a drink after we finish bowling? He says, great, let's go. You see? So you were extroverted, right? And you saw this person. So now you've actually gone to level 2, which is you are certain of allegiance. This guy is beginning to be your friend. See, when you walked in the bowling alley, you didn't have any need for allegiance. You were just there to bowl. But now you meet some guy or some girl, you see? And so you get into certainty of allegiance when this is what happens at the beginning of a relationship, right? A guy and a girl meet and they fall in love. That's level 2, certain of allegiance. So it used to be true you would give the girl your pin. I think that's obsolete now, but this, something like that
Right.
still goes on.
Mhm.
So giving them your pin is a type of self-sacrifice. You're sacrificing something to this person. You're giving them. So when you say to somebody, will you marry me? You hand them a diamond ring, And if they say yes, they take the diamond ring. And if they say no, you take it back to the store. So this is where you see self-sacrifice because you're certain of allegiance. This is what they want in the military. In any type of a group, they want you to be certain of your allegiance. And because you are certain of your allegiance, you will sacrifice yourself for that allegiance.
Mm.
So let's say you're going out with Gertrude and you find out that some guy's been bothering her. Well, you're probably going to confront this guy and say, look, I'm going out with this girl. Don't bother her again. See, you're putting yourself in jeopardy. Because if this guy says, don't tell me what to do, you could have a fist fight right there. So that's because you're certain of allegiance. And you see this all the time, how people protect the people they love. They protect their wives, their children, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So they sacrifice themselves for the other person.
Mm-hmm.
Or obviously in troops go into battle and die.
Mm-hmm.
And especially if you're talking about people who are not drafted, like now the US military has not had a draft for many decades. Those guys all signed up. So that's an outflow. When you are certain of your allegiance, it's an outflow. You're saying to Mary Lou, I love you, Mary Lou, and that's why I'm giving you this diamond ring. So will you marry me? See?
Mm-hmm.
That's certain of allegiance. The guy is not ambiguous. Okay, so if the relationship deteriorates, what happens? You become uncertain of allegiance. That's the first thing that happens. You start saying, I don't know if this is such a good idea. Maybe I shouldn't have taken this job. Maybe I shouldn't have joined this military unit. I actually know somebody who became a policeman, and once when he saw what the chain of command was doing, what was going on around him, he got out. So there was a point where he said, I'm uncertain of this allegiance. I don't know if this is such a good idea. And then finally he said, I'm not doing this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But before the person leaves, he will be indecisive. So this is something you look for, you see?
Mm-hmm.
So you said if you have some kind of a business, for example, you say to the guy, how do you feel about working for us? See what he has to say. If he says, I love it, great. You've got somebody who's not uncertain of his allegiance. He's not indecisive. You see?
Mm-hmm.
Indecision is an inflow. When you are being indecisive, you are inflowing into yourself. You are turned inward. You're not extroverted anymore. You're introverted. You're saying, this is not such a good idea. Why did I do this? You see?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, now the next thing that happens if the relationship continues to deteriorate is you go into a wrong allegiance. And that is how you become an enemy. Now, a wrong allegiance is an outflow. So, in other words, you are actually doing something. You're not withdrawn as you are at level 3. You are now reversing polarity and doing something. It's a state of enmity. So, the guy's going out with Mary Sue, then he becomes uncertain about her. Then he goes out with Mary Ellen, because you see, from the point of Mary Sue, that's a wrong allegiance. He shouldn't be doing that. So he has become an enemy. She gets mad at him if she finds out, because he's outflowing to this other party. Now, the relationship can continue to deteriorate, because you realize there are millions of people who are cheated on their spouses and not left the relationship, right? Millions and probably billions of people. So the wife never finds out, and the guy just stays with the wife because for whatever reason he wants to stay with her. So certainly his cheating on her was a wrong allegiance. That doesn't necessarily mean he's going to end the relationship. That happens at level 5. Lost allegiance. Lost allegiance is betrayal. So when they talk about giving government secrets to a foreign entity, right? That's betrayal. That's treason. So the Rosenbergs famously were executed in the 50s because they gave American atomic secrets to the Soviets. That's a betrayal. They lost their allegiance to the United States. They were citizens of the United States. They went down to level 5 and lost their allegiance. They betrayed their country, and they were convicted of treason. So a lost allegiance, you have to realize, is a withdrawal. You're withdrawing from whatever allegiance you had before. It's lost, you see? Now, if you continue to deteriorate from that state, you go into a state of disorientation. This is a person who's chaotic. He doesn't know what's going on. I mean, he's sort of in the area, in the subject, but it's chaotic. He experiences chaos because he has betrayed whatever it was he had allegiance to before. So now he's gotten down to a point where he's just disoriented. He's in a state of chaos. You will find this person is not cogent.
Is not what?
Cogent.
Cogent.
He cannot give you a clear explanation of what's going on with him in this context. That is one of the ways to spot this.
No, if you're very observant, can you spot that? If you've seen that over and over in people, you can spot that, you know, if you've known the person pretty well.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
So can you can spot that disorientation in somebody, even
Yes.
if,
Yes.
even if
Person is disoriented. You know, like you could have a guy who's going out with a lot of women, and there comes a point where he can't remember their names, he can't remember their faces, he can't remember where they came from, he can't remember, did I go on a cruise with her, or is this the one I took to Cancun? You know, he's in chaos. I mean, this is, you know, his level of allegiance has sunk to a point where it's just chaotic. And then below that is no possible allegiance. This is a person who's in oblivion. He can't talk about it. He doesn't know what his beliefs are on it. He's not merely disoriented. He is completely oblivious of it. This happens to people. This will happen to a person who completely forgets something. This happens in therapy. The guy will say, you know, I just remembered. I used to go out with this girl, Mary Jane. I had completely forgotten about her. I spent 3 years with this girl. See, he was oblivious of it. And in therapy, he actually came back up to 6, which is disorientation. See, Because remember, I said at the beginning, anytime relationships deteriorate, it's always because allegiance deteriorates.
Mhm.
So you can always fix a relationship by repairing the allegiance.
Mhm.
Now, the question is, will the person permit it? Because when a person gets down to the bottom, he's not insightful in the area. He doesn't know what's going on. He's chaotic or oblivious. By the time a person gets down there, you know, you're not going to save the relationship without professional intervention. So, this is the stuff of divorce courts. This is the stuff of courts in general. Like you have a guy, he hires an insurance company, he pays them all this money, he has a loss, he suffers a loss that's covered by the policy, and they don't pay him. They're cheating him. They're treating him like an enemy, okay? That ends up in court. He goes to court, he shows the policy, he says, these are my damages, they refuse to pay me. See, and you get a court order. So that's a case where there was, at the time where he paid them the money, there was some allegiance, you see?
Mhm.
But the company betrayed him because when he had a loss, they didn't cover it. So again, upscale people are going to be at or near the top of this. It's the type of person you can go and you can say, look, when you were in trouble, I helped you. I loaned you $500 on the cuff, okay? And now I'm in trouble and I'm asking you for help. So you see, that's where you're trading on a relationship, because that person may have gone down to indecision, level 3, and you're trying to get them back up to self-sacrifice. You see, I sacrificed myself for you. I went out on a limb for you, and you owe me. And you might be able to get him back up to say, yeah, you're right. We've been buddies a long time. Okay, how much do you need?
Mhm.
But if you're near the bottom, that's tough. That's tough because you're talking about traders. Now, I'm sure you have heard that for really thousands of years, enemies are respected, traitors are executed.
Mhm.
So, uh, the Geneva Convention. You put up your hands, they take you prisoner of war, they're obligated to feed you, clothe you, medical help, everything that you need to live till the end of the war, okay? Because you're a combatant. But a traitor, that's a different thing. And I'll tell you, it's a huge mistake to let a traitor run free. And there's all kinds of historical evidence for this. If someone betrays you, you can't trust them. And that's probably the end of the relationship, you know?
Mhm. Yeah.
So this is what you see. When you find somebody who's disoriented, he has betrayed somebody. That's how we got into that state.
Mhm. When did you say once somebody betrays one thing, they're likely to betray something else. Doesn't matter. Different thing. It's in their character.
Well, I mean, that makes some sense.
Mhm.
Uh, but you could have somebody who's, let's say you have a guy who's absolutely loyal to his company. He never
Mhm.
does anything bad. He's always on time. He follows orders. But as far as women, he cheats on the first woman with the second woman. He cheats on the second woman with the third woman. He cheats on the third woman with the fourth woman. And, that's how he is. Now, so those are two areas of allegiance, you see, which is why you have to realize this is a specific scale.
Gotcha. Okay. Makes sense.
And I want to again remind you the axis here on the right, the dotted vertical line, it's about perception.
Mhm.
It's all about how perceptive is this person. You know, when you bump into a dopey person, usually what that means is he's not perceptive. He's not picking up the signals because he's not perceptive.
Now,
So a lot of what we perceive as a person being smart is a person being perceptive.
now what about people that it's labeled somebody that, you know, sees all like the little nuances in somebody, and they can feel like something's wrong, like something's not right. They're perceptive to what's, you know, the character's actions when something's different, and they're just
Yes.
labeled as sensitive.
Yeah.
Is that the wrong? Is that person really sensitive, or are they just highly perceptive to what's going on?
Perception is perception.
Mm.
It could be sensory perception or it could be extrasensory perception. So what you get, you can, if you look at a person and that person is looking you right in the eye, okay, that's a good sign. He's perceiving you. So if a person is, you know, avoiding eye contact, not a good sign. The person is, he's probably at one of these lower levels. So that's something you look for. So any way you look at it, allegiance and perception are linked. You cannot separate these two things. And that tells you how to deal with it.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Anything else you want to go over the scale of allegiance?
I'm ready to move on.
Okay.
Scale of sexuality. Okay, so let me tell you right off the bat. I already know, because I've known this scale for a long time, and I've helped a lot of people. If two people are not compatible on this scale, they cannot have a successful romantic relationship. It does not matter how smart they are. It does not matter how attractive they are. It cannot be done. If you look at the scale, you'll see that some of these levels are obviously incompatible. For example, if a person is at level 5, cannot have sex, well, how is that person going to have a relationship with a person at level 4 who can have sex? That's an obvious conflict. So you have to be compatible. Now, compatible doesn't mean the same level. It means a compatible level. So that's the first thing.
Yeah.
Now, there are many stories about people who tried to have a relationship, couldn't do it, and then stayed friends for the rest of their life. It just did not work in this context. So, you know, they're not compatible on this scale, but they can still be friends. So that explains that, how that happens. Okay, so notice this is a spiral scale. And this manifestation, it can make mischief with people because level 7 is no sex and level 1 is no sex. But at level 7, it's no desire for sex. And at level 1, it's no need for sex. So you can have somebody who's so downscale that he doesn't even have a desire for sex. He just literally does not have it. Okay. That is as downscale as you can get in this context. And then you have a person at the top who has no need for sex. So this would be the type of person who becomes a monk or a nun. Okay. He joins an ashram or something. He just has no need for sex. That's a very upscale person on this scale. So you have to distinguish between the two. Because as I've pointed out many times, confusing level 1 and level 7 can be a catastrophic mistake. So you could bump into some guy who has no desire for sex. The guy winds up being a priest because he has no need for sex. He's above it. So That's the spiral aspect. Quantum. So again, this is a quantum scale. You're either at level 2 or you're at level 3, period. There's no intervening state. And you jump instantaneously from one to the next. This happens in therapy. You'll have a person who's at a certain level, he has some big therapeutic gain, and bang, suddenly he's at the next level up. Just like that, because it's a quantum scale. And it's a general scale, meaning a person has a general level on the scale. Once you find it, you're done for that person. You can find other people on the scale. It's not based on context. It's a general phenomenon. Now, notice the horizontal line in the middle, separating sane from insane. A person who's at level 1, 2, or 3 is sane. And a person who's at level 5, 6, or 7 is insane. A person who's at 4, he's kind of at the point of equilibrium.
Mm.
So, no desire for sex. This would be like, there are people in insane asylums. They have no interest in sex at all. They're too crazy. And then if that person improves, he will become a pervert of some kind. So all of the myriad forms of perversion are all at level 6. Then up from that, a person will improve from being a pervert to cannot have sex. Now, cannot have sex doesn't mean no desire for sex. The desire is there, but he can't have it. Now you can say, well, that's kind of a daffy state. Yes, as I said, 5, 6, and 7 are states of insanity. And as you go further down, you get more insane. Now, if this person has some very successful facilitation or meditation, he might come up to 4 and say, yeah, I can have sex. Doesn't mean he's doing it, but he can have it. Can. It's a potential. Okay? So at this point, he's not insane on the subject anymore. He's not particularly sane. He's not particularly insane. He's just sort of at this neutral point of no return. And then if you go up from can have sex, you get to sex with devotion. This is what most people are looking for, where there is a devotion there. You're sticking with the person. It doesn't mean you're going to stick with the person forever, but while you're with the person, you're devoted. I mean, 2 people can be going out, they're at level 3, and the girl shows up one day and says, I decided that you're really not the right guy for me, and we'll break it off. See, and usually if you do that, the guy he feels bad, but he says, okay, it's not necessarily big Megillah. It's not going to be in divorce court, or anything like that. It's just, okay, we did it and it was nice and let's move on. Then above that is the state that most people never get to, which is take it or leave it. This person's attitude about sex is he can take it or leave it. If the guy says yes, that's fine. If the guy says no, that's fine also. Because she can take it or leave it. So this is somebody who is perfectly okay with not having sex. Because they can take it or leave it. Now, if the right person comes along, they'll take it. But they're not going to be with somebody they don't really want to be with because they can take it or leave it. So this person would be selective. But, if they find the right person, then they will take it. And then up from that is the state you find in gurus and saints of no need for sex. They're just transcendent. They're above it. They're not interested. They're not going to have it. It's just there's no. It's a non-issue for them. Needless to say, most people never get there.
Right.
So that's it. That's how this works. So the way you use this is find your level to begin with, and then work on moving yourself up one level, whatever that means to you, because you're always better off at a higher level on any scale. The other thing is you use this to sort out partners. So if you have 2 people at level 6 they might be able to have a sexual relationship. They're both at the same level.
Hmm.
It's a very low level. They might not realize it's a low level because they don't know the scale, but they can have a relationship. So, most people who are, let's say 1, 2, or 3, are not going to want to be with somebody who's at 5, 6, or 7. Period.
Hmm.
Any questions?
Yeah. Like, I'm just like, I get the scale, but I'm also, just wondering who fits into some of these categories, because you said like 1, 2, or 3 will not want to have sex with 5, 6, and 7, or 4, 5, and 6. So,
5, 6, and 7.
right. So I was just wondering, like, would that explain why someone, like, even though that you could find somebody attractive, you're like, there's something about them that is not clicking that I cannot just get attracted to.
Well, look, there's all kinds of reasons why people are attracted or not attracted. I
Mhm.
mean, that's a mysterious thing, and it's beyond the scope of this. What this tells you is, where are you on this scale? You should know that. Okay. And this would be of great benefit to people at lower levels because they may not realize they're at a lower level. Many years ago in the United States, and I think this is true in other places too, but I actually lived here. It was common for men to have fistfights. Didn't necessarily mean they were enemies. Usually they'd be friends the next day. Are you familiar with this? This happened
Yeah.
all the time.
Hmm.
Doesn't happen anymore, okay, because the society has changed.
Right.
But it was quite common, like prior to about 1970. 2 teenagers would have a fist fight, and the next day they'd be playing basketball together. Now, the point is, how it's relevant to this is, that's just the way it was. I mean, I can't tell you how many guys I bumped into told me the same thing. Yeah, you have a fist fight with a guy, next day you're going out to the bar drinking together.
Yeah. You settle the
So,
differences.
so, so, so it's like, well, how do you explain that? What's this all about? But the fact is, it's a phenomenon. Okay. Now, men are much more prone to physical violence than women are.
Right.
Pretty much everybody knows that.
Right.
So, it's just a phenomenon. So, similar here, now you got to realize when I was a boy, not only was it not frowned upon to have fist fights, it was smiled upon. Oh, you had a fist fight. I see you got a black eye. Yeah, I beat the hell out of the guy. Well, great. Come on. I'll take you out for ice cream. That was just the culture. So I did not have the idea that having fist fights was a bad thing. My father started teaching me how to box when I was 3. That's how it was done in those days. So I'm just saying, a person might be at a level, he might not even realize it's a bad thing.
Hmm.
But when he looks at the scale, if he reads this book, he might say, I can see this is not a good thing. Because somebody could mistake one level for another.
Right. Right. And that's just what I want to clear up real quick is not sure, like, because I'm sure like how porn has just affected like lots of people.
Yes.
Does that put them in the category of perversion?
Well, in some cases it might,
Okay.
but there's, where one is on a scale is determined by many things. A person can be driven down scales in general by having traumatic incidents. Like you have a guy, he has a family and a house and a wife and children. You know, the house burns down, the wife runs away, the kid dies, the guy becomes a drunk, and he gets down to this level of cannot have sex. He goes from 4 down to 5.
Gotcha.
He's not even up to it. He just wants to get another bottle of whiskey. That's all.
Wow.
So, you know, or a guy becomes a drug addict. It's another way that somebody might deal with this. So there's a lot of reasons why a person could be at a level, but the level is the level. And you have to, it's always true in this book, you have to accurately assess what the level is. And people get these things mixed up. There's a difference between cannot have sex and no desire for sex. No desire for sex is a very sick person. Usually, literally, like if you have some guy, he's got 104 temperature, right? He's in bed with pneumonia. He has no desire for sex.
Yeah.
He just wants to get well. You see? So people, you know, go up and down the scale, but this tells you basically the basic architecture of human sexuality. This is the skeleton of it. And it tells you what relationships are going to work and what relationships are not going to work. And I can tell you, I worked as human development engineer with many people who came to me, improved, were happy with the results, and then broke up with the spouse or the boyfriend. Because they either moved higher on the scale, or they just realized the person's at another level, or something like this, whatever it is. Not unusual. It's not unusual for somebody to have some big benefit or some big detriment and the cause of the relationship to end. You know, it's very common, like if you have, let's say the child is abducted and murdered. That's a traumatic event.
Yeah.
Okay. That could put either or both of these people into cannot have sex.
Or even no desire for sex at that point.
Well, you would have to go down the scale. Since they were a couple and had children, they were probably somewhere around 4. And so you'll see the wife still wants to have sex, but the husband doesn't. Okay, this traumatized him to the point where he's gone down to cannot have sex. So that's the end of the relationship because she has to find somebody else.
Right. Makes
I
sense.
actually had a client who I worked with for some time. Divorced the husband, so I asked her about it. She said, "Well, I want to have sex." Well, duh.
Maybe he didn't want to have sex with her.
Right. That is obviously the point.
Right.
I did not inquire as to whether he's at 5, 6, or 7, because it's, you know, not really my business.
Right.
But that was exactly what she said. I want to have sex. So she got out of the relationship because she wanted to have sex. Sometimes people stay in the relationship because they want to have sex. So this is very helpful to people.
Are you ready for the last one?
I'm ready.
All right.
Okay, this is an unusual scale. Everybody enters the scale at level 4. Now, notice that it's a spiral scale, meaning there is an apparent congruence between 1 and 7. 1 is a radical protagonist and 7 is a radical antagonist. Now, think of it this way. Let's say you have a radical liberal and a radical conservative. Now, to the conservative, he is a radical protagonist. But to the liberal, he's a radical antagonist. But they're both extremists. See, they're both labeled as extremists. So it's my position is that I don't like extremists. I stay away from extremists. Extremists are dangerous. Okay, the Nazis were extremists. The KKK were extremists. Extremists are people who do bad things from some political motivation, like Islamic extremists, right? They kill people. So 1 and 7 are both extremists. So obviously there's a congruence there because they're both extremists.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I want to talk about gradual. So there are intervening stages in between these. You don't go instantaneously from level 4 to level 3. It's gradual and it's specific. So it depends on the area. In other words, when we talk about the word politics, this could be in various contexts. For example, there has been in Western culture for thousands of years a dichotomy between the classic and the romantic. For example, if you look at American government buildings, many of them are built in the classic style, meaning they are copying the Romans and the Greeks. That's because the founding fathers were all students of Greco-Roman culture. That's why they called it the Senate. They got that from the Romans. So they were classicists in a sense. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, on the other hand, you have the romantic. You find this in music. For example, true classical music is Haydn and Mozart. And then later on, almost a century later, you have Brahms, and who's a romantic. It's a different style of music. It's going to appeal to a different style of person. So you can look at a person and see him as, oh, he's a very romantic person, or he's a very classical person. So a person who sort of dresses conservatively, he's on the classical side, and a romantic, like Jimi Hendrix. You ever see the way Jimi Hendrix dressed? Mm-hmm. It was very romantic. So he was like, you might say he was a romantic. So that's a different dichotomy. So you'll see people who are, sort of like hippies. They have long hair and they wear scarves and earrings and tattoos. And then there's these other people who seem square to them. They're on the classic side. And you can go through and look at music, painting, sculpture, architecture, and you can see there's the classic tradition and there's the romantic tradition. Mm-hmm. They're very different traditions. In literature, they're very different traditions. So there are two poles there, right? The romantic pole and the classic pole. So it is a type of politics. So this is not just the politics of who's going to run the country. It can be other things too. Mm-hmm. So, for example, you might have in the College of Cardinals, right? They're trying to elect a new pope. You might have one bunch that wants one cardinal and another bunch that wants a different cardinal, right? Those are poles. Now, somewhere, they're going to eventually have to elect a pope. So that's not political in the sense of liberal or conservative. It's just this crowd wants this guy and this crowd wants this guy. There are two poles. So there's a type of politics in there. Mm-hmm. And you'll have all of this. You'll have extremists on both sides. Okay? Now, down from level 1 to level 2 is what you call a partisan protagonist. So this person, he's not an extremist, but he's a partisan. He's authentic. This would describe, for example, Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was an authentic conservative. He was not an extremist. And it's perfectly clear if you listen to him that he was not. He worked with Tip O'Neill, who was a Democrat. to get legislation through. Okay, not extremist. Okay, well, on the other side of the aisle, you could have the same thing. Person can be a partisan Democrat, but not an extremist Democrat. Okay, so that's an authentic Democrat. So, for example, Jack Kennedy was an authentic Democrat. He was not an extremist. Then from there, you go to a moderate protagonist or moderate antagonist. So this is somebody like John McCain. John McCain was a moderate Republican. And many Republicans did not like him because he wasn't authentic. He was tepid. And then you have people on the other side. And then, of course, centrist is where everybody starts. You always begin as a centrist and you either go up one way or down the other way. Mm-hmm. And as I point out in the book, there are very few actual centrists. The actual centrists are people who don't have a clue. You say to somebody, who are you voting for? And he says, you mean there's an election going on?
Right.
That's a centrist. He doesn't have a clue.
Right.
And if you say, I'm a Republican, what are you? And he says, I don't know. See, that's a centrist. There are very few because life tends to polarize people. Now, people who are nutty become extremists. They get carried away. So extremists on both sides are detrimental to the context, whatever it is. If you have a bunch of cardinals who are saying, no matter what you do, I'm not going to vote for that cardinal for Pope, period. That's an extremist. And then you can have guys on the other side. So obviously that makes it difficult to, they can't be talked out of it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So, the general position is to stay away from extremists. Because those people are troublemakers. Those are the people who will riot. Those are the people who will commit assassinations. Like the people who killed Jack Kennedy. Mm-hmm. They were extremists. They wanted him gone. It wasn't enough to wait until the election and vote him out like most people. That's an extreme thing. Mm-hmm. So, or like the guy who killed Lincoln, John Wilkes Booth. He was a radical Confederate. Went to the extent of assassinating the president of the Union. So anytime you see terrorists like the Irish Republican Army, right, blowing up banks, blowing up schools, they're extremists. Those are dangerous people. Mm-hmm. Normal people do not become extremists. Normal people, you can have a conversation with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they may not agree with what you have to say, but they're not going to, be so ill-willed towards you.
That's right. There was a show that was on for 30 years called Firing Line, hosted by William F. Buckley, mm-hmm. prominent conservative. Very good show. If you like to actually hear what important people have to say, it's a good show. He had hundreds of famous people on there that came on, and he let them talk about their point of view. He debated with them. He told them what he thought. And, it was congenial and enlightening. So, for example, Noam Chomsky, right, who is definitely a liberal, was on that show. So I watched that, and I got to hear these two very intelligent, highly educated men say what they thought about a variety of issues, okay? So that's not extremism. That's debate.
Mhm.
Extremists are usually people who will break the law. They will rig elections. They will assassinate their opponents. That's what extremists do. That's how you can tell who's authentic and who's extreme.
Mhm.
You know,
Makes-
an extremist will invent some trumped up charge to get his political opponent put in jail. And if you have enough money to bribe the judge, it can be done. The mafia stayed in power for decades by doing that. That is how they did it. They bribed all the policemen, including not only the cop on the beat, all the way up to the lieutenants and the captains, and they had bribed all the judges. So didn't take much to get the case thrown out. So, and that's what extremists do. They will resort to bribery, extortion, terrorism, things like that.
Mhm.
Partisan protagonists and partisan antagonists don't do things like that. So that's a good way to spot those people.
Yeah. Yeah, there's you can definitely, a few have made their stance on the scale known for sure.
Yes. Yes.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. And so, you know, when people come out with these outrageous things that don't even make sense to the average person, those are extremists.
Mm.
And my observation is that extremists are mentally ill. They might not necessarily be psychotic, but they're certainly neurotic, or they wouldn't be extremists.
Mm.
They might be partisans.
Mm.
But that's what happens to mentally ill people who become engaged in some kind of a political context. They become extremists. A famous example of this is Caligula appointed his horse to the Senate.
Mm.
It's obvious if you study Caligula, which I have, that he was insane. Same thing with Nero. Most people know that Nero was insane. Both of them were killed by Romans who realized that they couldn't have a crazy person for a senator, and they killed him. So this happens in all kinds of contexts. Even in the mafia, Carlo Gambino was not an extremist. That's why they never got anything on him. He died in his own home.
Mm.
He was not a nut. Did he break the law? Yes. Everybody knew who he was. Everybody knew what he did. Everybody knew where he lived. He lived in my neighborhood, but he was not an extremist.
Mm.
You know, there's a famous story about Carlo Gambino was in a restaurant and some other mafia guy came in and insulted him in front of all the people. Carlo didn't say a word. He didn't argue with him. He didn't raise his voice. That guy turned up dead shortly thereafter. So an extremist doesn't get carried away. I'm not saying being in the mafia is a good thing.
Right. I get the point.
But I'm just saying that he was not an extremist. There were people in the mafia who were crazy,
Mm.
like Joe Gallo. Joe Gallo was behind the assassination of another mafia leader, okay? And it was well known, and they killed him because they don't want extremists going around killing mafia dons. I mean, to tell you about Joe Gallo, if you don't think he's crazy, he kept a lion in his basement. So if anybody gave him a hard time, he said, look, You want to go down the basement with the lion? He hasn't eaten in a while. Okay,
Hmm.
that's a crazy person.
Hmm. Yeah. Extremist crazy person is not good for business.
That's right. Not good for business.
All right. Any last words you have on the scale of politics?
No, no, that's about it. But this tells you a lot. The fact that there are really very few centrists, and the people who are centrists don't have a clue.
Hmm.
And it tells you about what people to stay away from, which is the people at 1 and 7.
Hmm.
Just stay away from them. Like if you have people who say, I actually heard somebody say uh, that abortion is murder, and anybody who has abortion should be tried for murder.
That is
Okay, so
extreme.
that's an extreme. That's an extreme position,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's an extremist.
Now, what about? I think you mentioned it earlier too, but the person who doesn't matter what's going on with their party or any of that, they're still going to vote that way.
Right.
That's even though it makes
That's
no sense.
that's right.
Hmm.
That's right. So it's often said that politics is the art of compromise.
Hmm.
Henry Clay, the famous 19th century American statesman, he ran for president one way or another 6 times, was never elected, but was probably the greatest statesman of his day, because he actually was the person who prevented the Civil War for many years by compromise.
Mm-hmm.
So, over 500,000 people were killed in the Civil War, which is by far the most America has ever lost in any war. Okay, so obviously it was a catastrophe. Uh, so, Henry Clay was in there, and he knew compromise, and he had many. He was a Secretary of State, and he was known as the Great Compromiser. And not only does it work in legislation, it works in judiciary too. You don't want an extremist judge.
Mm.
You want a judge who's going to be fair-minded, and he's going to look at both sides. And most judges have a tendency to split the loaf.
Mm.
Obviously, it depends on the evidence. There's some people who are as guilty as sin, and they deserve to be beaten badly in court, whether it's civil or criminal. But
Mm.
you want an even-headed person, and a person with equanimity to be in a position like that,
That I would.
and make something good happen, regardless of what he thinks.
Yes.
Like Ronald Reagan often said, if I can get half a loaf, I'll take it.
Mm.
So, a lot of good legislation was passed with him as president and with a Democrat Congress, because he would work out a deal with them. In those days, you didn't have too many extremists in Congress. Now, wall-to-wall extremists. I mean, I say that kind of as a joke, because obviously there are persons in there who are not extremists, but there are a lot of extremists who get elected, because there's a lot of people today in America who are extremists, and they vote for extremist candidates. And it's always a mistake, because you can't get anything done.
No. No, and there's no
The
rational.
United States hasn't had a balanced budget since the 80s, because when the Republicans took over the Congress, Bill Clinton was president. He is not an extremist. He worked with them to sign 4 balanced budgets. Okay, so, you know, the partisan Republicans and the partisan Democrats were able to do something that was good for the country, which is pass a balanced budget. Hasn't happened since. So that's it.
It is amazing. It is amazing. All right, Jim, where can people get this book?
Well, it's very easy to find. If you just type the word Septemics, Septemics, into any search engine, you'll get hundreds of responses, including all the people selling the book. But it includes, obviously, Amazon, Barnes and Nobles. It's not hard to find this book.
Right.
But I want to invite your viewers to my website, which is septemics.com, where you can see what many readers have said about it, what many journalists have written about it, what the reviews are. You can read sections of the book itself. And if you wish, you can listen to a pre-recorded introduction to Septemics by yours truly. And by the time you finish that, you're probably going to want to buy the book.
Yes.
Because if you can read English reasonably well and you want to improve yourself or others, this book is for you.
The book is amazing. Read it every day. So everything that you say is just absolutely spot on, 100%. 100%.
Yes, because it's natural law. It's all natural law. I just discovered this. When I discovered it, I said, wait a minute. I can go from helping people by the hundreds, which is what I have been doing as human development engineer, to helping people by the millions if I put this on a book and get it out. And so I spent 25 years working on the book to make it foolproof so that it was understood and expressed at a level that any person can use it if you can read English. If you're willing to read a book, it's there. And since everybody is at some level on every scale, it's extremely useful information.
Yes. Yes, it has. Just to go over what you have said, I've found myself on a couple scales, and exactly what you said. It's been like a huge uplift, like this almost calm that has come over me for a brief period. I'm like, okay, now I know where I got to go.
That's right.
So anybody that's looking for some sort of, hope into getting better, get the book. It's fantastic. All right.
Thank you.
It's been an honor.
Thanks, Brett.
Yeah. Any final words you want to say?
Well, I just want to say that the data in this book are vital for every human being and can help you to achieve your goals faster and easier by explaining what might otherwise seem to be inexplicable. The general response that people have when they look at this is they say, oh, yeah, I see. It's a source of serial revelations and cognitions and epiphanies as you read it. You say, oh, now I understand Joe. Now I understand Mary. Now I understand why I'm succeeding at this or why I'm failing at this. That's what it does. Every time you find a level, whether it's yours or somebody else, you have a realization. Necessarily, you have a realization. This is not like most books. Most books you read it, and it could be amusing, could be informative, but you don't necessarily have a realization as a result of it.
Right.
This is because it's natural law. It's like when I found out about the Fibonacci sequence, I said, oh, yeah, I see. Seashells, pine cones, they have these numbers. This is where the numbers come from, So I had a realization. But, that's just one realization once you know about that. This is across all human phenomena.
Yeah. It's fantastic. Guys, check out the series. It's all recorded now. Be out there. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Brett.